2016 budget, India surpassed Russia to become the fourth largest defence spender in the world, but the capital outlay was slashed by 8.5%. What does this mean for the Indian soldier? Our correspondent Dharvi Ved brings us this report.
India joined the military big boys club by becoming the fourth largest spender on defence last year. 2016 was also the first time since the mid-1980s that defence pensions were presented with the budget. After a year that saw army veterans take to the streets to demand one rank, one pension, a whopping $12 billion were budgeted for OROP and the 7th Pay Commission. All this did paint a rosy picture. However, for a country moving towards defence modernisation, the capital outlay was slashed by 8.5%.
2016 was a testing year for the Indian Defence Forces. The Pathankot attack, the Uri attack and the Nagrota attack, followed by frequent cross-border shelling and the so-called surgical strikes, got India to the brink of conflict with Pakistan and questioned India's war preparedness. On the other hand, soldiers posted a string of videos on social media fueling a debate on whether there's a possible failure in providing basic amenities to the soldiers. Prime Minister Modi is making ambitious plans to modernize the Indian Defence Forces. But all this boils down to one single question: is India spending enough on its soldiers?
A 2015 Controller and Auditor General report revealed that India was facing a severe shortage of ammunition, having only enough to last 20 days of a full-scale war. Some varieties of ammunition with the army, the report added, would barely last 10 days of conflict. There is also a shortage of 47% in holding of BMP vehicles, the mainstay of mechanized infantry of the 1.8 million strong Indian Army. In addition, there is an acute shortage of protective gear for soldiers. In October 2009, the Army authorized over 353,000 bulletproof jackets. Under half of those were to come in the 11th plan between 2007 to 2012, with the remaining to be in during the 12th five-year plan. But the reality is that no new jackets were provided till March 2016. According to reports, the Army needs an additional 180,000 jackets. The orders for these are yet to be placed. The Indian Air Force and the aviation units of the Army also have obsolete equipment.
There is a huge shortage of bulletproof vests. The vests themselves that are held are bulky and do not provide protection all over the body. For example, they cover the front and the back, but not the sides, not the neck. So there are major challenges over there which need to be rectified.
The truth is that capital budget is mainly used for procurement of weapons. But more than half of that goes towards annual payments due for military equipment already bought.
A budget is generally based on a wish list. And the wish list must start from the man behind the gun, because it is ultimately the man behind the gun who is going to produce the results.
Prime Minister Modi has time and again stressed on defence modernisation. With the new plan, he wants to come up with what is being dubbed as a shoot-to-kill army.
It will be a great day if the Indian Armed Forces can be transformed from a defensive strategic approach to an offensive strategic approach, but it will cost a lot.
In November 2016, India began exploring the global markets for 185,000 modern assault rifles, along with body armors and helmets. However, as the defence forces continue to grapple with pending orders and the soldiers make do with the shortage of weapons and protective gear, it remains to be seen how capital expenditure pans out this year. In New Delhi, Dharvi Ved, WION.
Mr. Koshish, as that report's pointing out, it seems that there is a delay in procurement of weapons and protective gear for India's armed personnel. What do you attribute to that? What is the reason why?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question to answer. Let me first of all say it's not entirely on account of the budgetary constraints. The fact that we are not utilizing the entire fund which is allocated actually means that there is much more that we can buy with the amount which is allocated. There is a perception, of course, that the finance ministry deliberately doesn't, approve the cases, but I think it's more of a perception than reality. Having sort of been a part of the system, I don't subscribe to that view at all. Now, there's another view that it's on account of the procedural tangles, to which I'll say that the first DPP, or the Defence Procurement Procedure, was promulgated in 2002. It has been revised several times in 2003, 5, 8, 11, 13, and so on. And therefore, to say that, despite all these revisions, we have not been able to fix the problems insofar as the procedures are concerned, again, to my mind, is too simplistic a view to take.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, with all these problems, perceived problems with the procedures, we have been able to spend 5 lakh crores. So it's a question of there being no outcome orientation to the expenditure that we incur.
Okay.
I mean, what are we spending on? Why are we spending what we are spending on, these things? Who's taking the...
so more of a deep dive needed to understand.
Absolutely.
You're calling it procedural tangles. I'll use the other euphemism, that's red tapeism. That does exist. There's no denying it, General Katoch. But in your opinion, how does that one solve that problem, especially in a country like India, where the value of the Indian soldier's valor is always thumped about, it's talked about, but when it comes to this actual guaranteeing of safety, how does one go about doing that?
Right. May I just go a little bit back actually to the visuals which were shown, and you also spoke about some of the videos which had cropped up where certain Jawan of the BSF and the CRPF, etc., they were on video, they had been mouthing their grievances. Now, I think that is, in my personal view, that is a very dangerous trend, because in a large army, in a large security force apparatus, there will be some people who are disgruntled. And in my own personal experience of the armed forces, this is one aspect which is a great deal of care is taken to ensure that those aspects of a Jawan's welfare are very well looked after, and they remain very well looked after today. Now, the second aspect is that when we look at shortages which are there in terms of weapons, and I beg your pardon, in terms of aircraft, or in terms of guns or tanks, etc., which have been mentioned here, that is actually looking into conventional conflict. But what we are really faced with today is internal conflict. And as far as internal conflict is concerned, I think the armed forces and the other security forces which are related, the central armed police forces like the BSF and all that,
right,
they are reasonably well equipped. There are 2 problem areas as far as this equipment is concerned, just 2 areas which I feel need highlighting. One is your personal rifle. Rest everything is fine. I think your personal rifle is something which needs a change, and needs a dramatic change now. It is very surprising that a country like India, with such great talent, you can send a mission to Mars. You can send, you can have an Agni 5 going to precision within 1 meter. But when you're looking at a rifle, which is something which is very elementary and which even countries like Singapore can make a world-class rifle, why has India faltered? This is one. Number 2 is what Brigadier Gurmeet Kamal also very correctly mentioned, is the bulletproof jacket. Why cannot India manufacture a simple bulletproof jacket which gives adequate protection to the vitals and the body and to the head, a helmet? And this doesn't require very superior technology. It requires a simple technology, and we need to get about it. Right? Mr. Kaushis has mentioned that there are no problems, but you see, the question is, let us not put our head into the sand and say everything is fine and hunky-dory. If it was fine and hunky-dory, we would be a first-rate power today. We are not a first-rate military power today, because everything is not fine and hunky-dory. We are still following the British procedures set by them in 48, and the British followed those prior to 47, and the British put those procedures to rule India, not to, right? It's a totally different country today, but we are still following those archaic rules which have been meant to enslave us, and unless we break those shackles, I do not think we are going to get anywhere from here.
Okay, fine. So a big amount of reassessment, refurbishment needed, in your opinion. I'm running out of time, but I do want to ask you both for your closing remarks. I'll come to you, Mr. Kaushis, first. This rise in the spending in the defense budget, do you look at that as because of the threat perspective, or do you think it's part of India's global ambitions?
Well, it's both. First of all, it's a question of necessity. You need to spend more because it's a matter of fact that there's been over the years a gap between what is asked for and what is allocated. Now, while the extent of this under allocation may be debatable, but the fact remains that there is a gap between what the Ministry of Defence asks for and what it gets, which means that it doesn't have sufficient money to spend on not just modernization, but on various other things.
Okay.
And incidentally, I never said there is no problem. What I said was that as of now, insofar as the capital acquisition is concerned, to my mind, the problem is not primarily money. The problem will definitely come up if and when the pace of modernization programs picks up. That is when we are going to require more money. But the government has to have more money to be able to give more money to defense.
Okay, so the oversimplification of the problem is a problem in itself.
Yes, certainly.
General Katoch, very quickly, what are your hopes and expectations from this year's budget?
I think when we talk in terms of having budget in terms of 2 or 3% of the GDP, that is not a realistic assessment, right? It's not good, and it's not going to happen. Well, we should look into our threats, and we should be able to cater for those threats. I think what has happened over the last 2 years, the government has been very proactive and very sensitive to the needs of defense. It is not just a question of being sensitive to the armed forces. I think it's being sensitive to the needs of India's national security, and I hope that sensitivity is maintained as far as this particular budget is concerned. Because what we are really dealing with, what we need to remember is, what does the budget do? A budget is not simply a statement of accounts. It is also a statement of intent.
Right.
And once you put out this budget onto the international stream, it gives your statement of intent. If we are seen to be weak on national security, in my personal view, I think other countries will take advantage of it. And if we are seen to be strong on national security, I think then we can look forward to many years of peace.
Okay, fantastic. General Katoch, Mr. Koshish, thanks so much. It's been a lovely and lively discussion. You both brought very interesting perspectives and were at loggerheads at some points, but we really enjoyed having both of you in the studio with us. I'm going to have to wrap up this edition of the Union Budget Special on that note. Thanks so much for joining us here on WION. I'm Aisha Sindhu. News and updates continue on the other side of this short break. Bye-bye.